Maria had always been the kind of person people noticed only when they needed something. She worked quietly, spoke softly, and never liked to argue. Her world was small: a rented room at the edge of town, a job at the local grocery store, and a few wilted plants on her windowsill that she tried to keep alive. Every morning she woke up before the sun, boiled water for coffee, and watched the street come to life from her window. People in her neighborhood often said she was slow. Not because she wasn't smart, but because she didn't move fast enough for their liking. She took her time with everything: folding clothes, sweeping the floor, arranging the fruit at the store where she worked. She believed in doing things with care, even small things. But in a world that praised speed and success, her patience looked like laziness. Her boss at the grocery store, Mr. Lewis, was a man who never smiled. He often scolded her in front of customers. "Maria, you're too slow. The apples won't sell themselves," he'd say, shaking his head as if she were a lost cause. She'd nod, whisper an apology, and go back to work. At home, things weren't much better. Her mother would sigh whenever Maria came to visit. "You're 26, she'd say, "and still working at that little shop. When will you do something with your life?" Her father rarely said much, but his silence was heavier than words. Her younger brother, who worked at a construction company and earned good money, didn't hide his pride. "You should find a real job," he'd tease. "Something that pays more than pocket change." Maria never argued. She'd just smile weakly, change the subject, and help her mother wash the dishes. But deep inside, her heart ached. Every word, every sigh, every judgment chipped away at her confidence. She began to believe maybe they were right. Maybe she really was useless. Still, she showed up to work every day. She'd help old customers carry their groceries, wipe the counters clean, and make sure the fruit displays looked nice. The pay was small, but it helped her pay rent and buy simple meals: rice, bread, and sometimes a few eggs. She didn't ask for much. Her only friend was Mrs. Clara, an older woman who came to the store every afternoon to buy milk and biscuits. She always smiled at Maria and asked how her day was. Sometimes they talked about the weather or the stray cats that hung around the alley behind the store. "You have a kind heart, dear," Mrs. Clara would say. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Those words were like little rays of sunlight to Maria. One afternoon, after finishing her shift, Maria sat by the river that ran behind the market. She liked to come there when the world felt too loud. The sound of water soothed her thoughts. Children played nearby, their laughter echoing through the air. She watched them for a while, smiling faintly. She thought about her life, how ordinary it was, how invisible she felt. She wanted to do something meaningful, something that made her feel alive, but she didn't know where to start. Every time she tried to imagine a different future, she heard her mother's voice telling her she wasn't capable of much. So she stayed where she was, letting days pass like pages in a book she wasn't sure she wanted to read. The town she lived in was small, where everyone knew everyone's story, or at least thought they did. And in everyone's story about Maria, she was the girl who never went far, who stayed in her comfort zone, who didn't try. They didn't know how many nights she lay awake wondering what her purpose was. They didn't see how hard she tried just to keep going. Winter came slowly that year. The mornings were cold enough to make her fingers numb as she unlocked the store door. She wore the same faded blue sweater every day, the one her grandmother had knitted years ago. Some customers noticed and gave her pitying looks, which she hated even more than harsh words. One rainy evening, as she was closing the store, her boss complained again. "You'll never get anywhere in life moving at that pace," he muttered. "You've been here for 3 years and haven't improved much." She wanted to tell him that she stayed late to clean the place when everyone else left, that she came in early to restock the shelves before the deliveries arrived, but she didn't say anything. She just nodded, grabbed her umbrella, and stepped out into the rain. The walk home was long, about 20 minutes through narrow streets. The rain came down harder and the wind made her umbrella shake. Her shoes soaked through and she shivered with every step. Still, she walked quietly, watching the streetlights blur through the rain. On the way, she passed by a group of teenagers sheltering under a bus stop roof. One of them pointed at her and laughed. "There goes Miss Slowpoke," he joked. She didn't react, just kept walking. Their laughter followed her like an echo she couldn't escape. When she finally reached her small apartment, she hung her wet clothes by the window and made herself some soup. It wasn't much, but it warmed her hands. She sat on her old wooden chair looking out at the rain. Somewhere inside her, a quiet sadness grew, the kind that doesn't shout or cry but just stays there heavy and silent. Sometimes she wished someone would see her differently. Not as a failure, not as someone who didn't try, but as a person who was doing her best in a world that never seemed satisfied. One night, she wrote in her small notebook, something she often did when her thoughts felt too heavy. "I want to be useful," she wrote. "Not to impress people, but to make a difference. Even if it's small." She closed the notebook and placed it by her bedside. She didn't know that soon. Her wish would come true in a way she could never imagine. Days turned into weeks, and the same routine continued. Work, home, sleep, repeat. People still whispered about her, still called her that slow girl, but she was used to it now. She had learned to smile through it, to keep her heart soft even when the world felt hard. Then one evening, as she was about to leave work, she noticed the sky turning dark faster than usual. The wind picked up and thunder rolled in the distance. She packed her things quickly, hoping to reach home before the rain started. But as soon as she stepped outside, the downpour began, heavy, cold, relentless. She opened her umbrella and began walking. The streets were almost empty, except for the occasional car splashing through puddles. The lights reflected on the wet pavement, turning everything into a blur of gold and gray. Halfway home, near the old park, she heard something, a faint sound that didn't belong to the rain. It was soft at first, almost drowned by the storm. She stopped and listened. There it was again, a cry. It sounded like a child. She looked around, but the street was deserted. Her heart began to race. Maybe she imagined it, but then she heard it again, louder this time. A trembling, frightened voice calling out. Maria hesitated for a moment. It was dark, and the park was known for being unsafe at night. But something in her wouldn't let her walk away. She tightened her grip on the umbrella and followed the sound. The cries led her toward a small shelter near the park's entrance, a broken bus stop with a bench under it. There she saw a small figure huddled against the wall, drenched in rain. As she came closer, she realized it was a little boy, no older than 7 or 8. His clothes were soaked and his lips were trembling. For a second, she froze. What was a child doing here alone in the storm? She knelt beside him, her voice gentle. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked. The boy looked up, his eyes wide with fear. He didn't say anything, just stared at her. "It's okay," she said softly. "You're safe now. Let's get you out of the rain." He hesitated, but when she offered her hand, he took it. His small fingers were ice cold. She wrapped her scarf around his shoulders and guided him under her umbrella. The boy clung to her arm as they walked. By the time they reached her apartment, both were shivering. She quickly found a towel and helped him dry off. Then she gave him a warm blanket and a cup of hot milk. Slowly, color returned to his face. "Where's your home?" she asked quietly. The boy's eyes filled with tears. I don't know," he whispered. "I can't find my mommy." Maria's heart sank. She didn't know what to do yet, but she knew one thing. She couldn't let this child go back out there alone. That night, as rain beat against the window, she sat beside the boy, watching him fall asleep on her couch. She didn't realize it then, but that simple act, stopping to help when no one else did, was about to change her life forever. And for the first time in a very long time, Maria didn't feel useless. She felt needed. Maria barely slept that night. She sat by the couch, watching the little boy sleep under her blanket. His small chest rose and fell slowly, his face peaceful now that he was warm and safe. The storm outside had finally calmed, but her mind was racing. Who was this boy? Where had he come from? And why was he out there alone in the rain? She looked at the clock. It was almost 3 a.m. She didn't have much, but she made sure he had what she could offer. She had given him her only extra blanket and the last bit of milk in her fridge. She didn't care about herself that night. Something about him made her heart ache with protectiveness. When the morning light finally peeked through her thin curtains, she quietly got up to prepare breakfast. The smell of fried eggs filled the small apartment. A few minutes later, she heard a soft voice behind her. "Where am I?" the boy asked, rubbing his eyes. "You're safe here," Maria said with a gentle smile. "You were out in the rain last night. I brought you here to keep you warm." The boy looked around the room, confused. "I want my mommy," he whispered, his voice trembling. Maria knelt down so her eyes met his. "We'll find her, okay? But first you need to eat something." She placed a plate of food in front of him. He hesitated at first, but after a few bites he ate quickly, like he hadn't eaten properly in days. "What's your name?" she asked softly. "Leo," he said after a pause. "I was walking with my mom and then, I don't remember. There were so many cars and lights. Then I got lost." Maria felt a lump in her throat. She could only imagine how scared he must have been. She wanted to comfort him, but she didn't want to make him cry. Instead, she said gently, "It's okay, Leo, you're safe now. We'll figure this out together." She didn't own a television, but she remembered hearing people talk at the store about a missing child a few days ago, a boy from a nearby town. She wondered if this could be him, but she didn't want to frighten him with too many questions. Not until he felt calmer, after breakfast. She wrapped him in her old jacket, the one she wore in winter, and told him they would go to the police station. The boy looked nervous but trusted her enough to hold her hand tightly. As they walked through the streets, people stared. A woman like Maria, who usually went unnoticed, now walked with a little boy by her side, his hand in hers. A few people whispered, but she ignored them. When they reached the small police station, the officer on duty looked up from his desk.
"Yes, can I help you?"
he asked. Maria explained how she found the boy in the rain and brought him home for safety. The officer listened, nodding slowly, then looked at Leo. "What's your name, son?" he asked kindly. "Leo," the boy said, his voice still quiet. The officer's expression changed. He quickly stood up and called another officer over. They whispered for a moment before the first one turned back to Maria. "Ma'am," he said, "this boy matches the description of a missing child from Dr. Lawson's family. He's been missing for 3 days." Maria's eyes widened. "Dr. Lawson? The doctor from Maple Street?" "Yes," the officer said. "The whole town has been searching for him." Maria's heart pounded. She looked at Leo, who was now clutching her sleeve tightly. "It's okay," she whispered to him. "You'll see your mother soon." The officers made a few calls, and within half an hour, a car arrived outside the station. A man stepped out, tall, with tired eyes and a face that showed sleepless nights. It was Dr. Lawson. The moment Leo saw him, his eyes lit up. "Daddy!" the boy shouted, running toward him. Dr. Lawson fell to his knees, scooping his son into his arms. "Leo, my boy." "Oh, thank God," he said, tears filling his eyes. He held him tightly as if afraid to let go. The room went quiet, everyone watching the reunion. Even Maria felt her eyes sting with tears. After a few moments, Dr. Lawson looked up at her. "You found him?" he asked. Maria nodded. "He was out in the rain near the park. I couldn't just leave him there." Dr. Lawson walked over, still holding his son. "You saved his life," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea how much this means to me." Maria didn't know what to say. She simply smiled and said, "I'm just glad he's safe now." The police thanked her, and Dr. Lawson offered to drive her home. She politely declined. "I'll walk," she said softly. "It's not far." She didn't want to trouble anyone. As she walked back through the streets, the world felt different. The cold wind didn't sting as much, and the sound of her wet shoes on the pavement didn't bother her. She had done something that mattered, something that no one could call useless. When she reached her apartment, she sat on her bed, still in disbelief. She had never expected her simple decision to stop and help would lead to something so big. For the first time in her life, she felt proud of herself. She had always believed she wasn't capable of much, but that night she had proved herself wrong. The next day, she went back to work as usual. When she walked into the store, her boss looked at her with surprise. "You're the one from the news," he said. "The woman who found the missing boy." Maria froze. "News?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he said, turning the small radio behind the counter toward her. A reporter was talking about the incident, how a kind-hearted woman named Maria Santos had rescued the lost son of Dr. Lawson. They called her a hero. Her picture, taken outside the police station, had been shared all over town. Customers began to notice, too. They smiled at her, some even congratulated her. "You did something amazing," one woman said. Another added, "See? You're not useless at all." Those words, once painful to hear in the opposite form, now felt like healing. Maria didn't know how to react. She wasn't used to attention. All she had wanted was to help a scared little boy. She didn't see herself as a hero, just someone who did what she hoped anyone else would have done. Later that afternoon, as she was restocking the shelves, the doorbell above the shop rang. When she turned around, she saw Dr. Lawson standing there. He smiled when he saw her. "Maria," he said warmly, "I wanted to thank you again properly." She quickly wiped her hands on her apron. "There's no need, sir," she said shyly. "I'm just glad Leo is home safe." He looked at her for a moment as if trying to read her. "You did more than most people would have done," he said. "You showed compassion when others might have walked away. That says a lot about who you are." Maria blushed and lowered her eyes. "Thank you," she murmured. Dr. Lawson handed her a small envelope. "This isn't payment," he said quickly, seeing her hesitate. "It's just a token of appreciation. And," he paused, "if you ever want to change, I could use someone like you at my clinic. Someone kind and patient." Think about it, she was speechless. No one had ever offered her a real opportunity before. She nodded slowly. "I'll think about it," she said softly. After he left, Maria stood there for a long time holding the envelope in her hands. Inside was a simple note that read, "Thank you for saving my son, and for reminding me that kindness still exists in this world." She folded the note carefully and tucked it into her notebook, right beside the page where she had once written, "I want to be useful." That night, when she got home, she looked around her small apartment. It still looked the same. The same worn-out chair, the same faded curtains, the same cracked cup by the sink. But something had changed inside her. She no longer saw herself as just the girl who worked at the grocery store. She had done something good, something real. Before going to bed, she whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. For Leo, for the chance to help, and for the feeling she hadn't known in years, the feeling of being enough. As she turned off the light, she thought about Dr. Lawson's offer. A new job. A new beginning. Could she really do it? The thought scared her, but it also filled her with hope. Maybe this was her chance to start again. Outside, the night was calm, the rain long gone. For the first time, Maria didn't feel small. She didn't feel invisible. She had found something that had been missing all along, her own worth. And she had found it not through success or money, but through compassion, the same thing people once mocked her for. She smiled to herself as she drifted to sleep, unaware that this small act of kindness would soon open a door to a future she never dreamed she could have. Maria woke up early the next morning, her mind still thinking about Dr. Lawson's offer. She sat on the edge of her bed, holding the small note he had given her. The paper was slightly creased from how many times she had unfolded and refolded it. She couldn't believe that someone like him, a respected doctor, had noticed her, had seen something in her that no one else ever did. All her life, people had told her she wasn't good enough, that she didn't have any real skills. And yet, here was a man who saw value in the very thing everyone else called weakness, her kindness. But doubt crept in quickly. What if she wasn't capable of the job? What if she made a mistake? The thought of working in a clinic around doctors and patients felt far beyond her reach. She had only finished high school. She had no special training. Still, something inside her whispered that maybe, just maybe, she should try. That afternoon, she went to work at the grocery store as usual. The customers were friendlier than before. Some even stopped to talk to her. "You're the one who saved that little boy, right?" one woman asked. "Bless your heart." Maria smiled shyly and nodded. She wasn't used to praise. Even her boss, who had always been hard on her, treated her differently. He didn't scold her that day. Instead, he said, "You made the store proud, Maria." It felt strange to hear those words. Proud. No one had ever said that about her. After her shift ended, she decided to walk by Dr. Lawson's clinic. It wasn't far from the market, a small building painted white with green plants lining the windows. She stopped across the street, watching people go in and out. She didn't have the courage to step inside yet, but she wanted to see what it was like. Through the glass doors, she could see Dr. Lawson talking to a nurse. He looked busy but calm, speaking kindly to everyone who came in. For a moment, she imagined herself working there, greeting patients, helping them feel at ease. The thought scared her, but it also warmed her heart. That night, when she got home, she opened her notebook and wrote a few words. Maybe this is my chance to change. The next morning, she made a decision. She would visit the clinic. Not to ask for the job right away, but just to thank Dr. Lawson again and see what he had in mind. She wore her cleanest clothes, a plain white blouse and a long skirt. Her hands trembled slightly as she knocked on the clinic's glass door. Inside, a young nurse smiled at her. "Can I help you?" "Yes," Maria said softly. "I'm here to see Dr. Lawson." The nurse nodded. "Please wait a moment." A few minutes later, Dr. Lawson came out from his office. When he saw her, his face brightened. "Maria, I was hoping you'd come." She smiled nervously. "I just wanted to thank you again for the note and the offer." He gestured for her to sit down. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You did something extraordinary. The least I can do is give you a chance." "I'm not sure I can do much," she admitted. "I've never worked in a clinic before." Dr. Lawson smiled gently. "You don't need experience to be kind, Maria. What I need is someone who cares, someone who can listen to people, help them feel comfortable. We can teach you the rest." His words filled her with a strange mix of fear and excitement. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I'm sure," he said. "Come tomorrow morning. We'll start small. You'll assist the receptionist and help organize things. You'll learn along the way." Maria nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "I'll come." That night, she barely slept. Her heart was full of nervous energy. She kept imagining how the next day would go, what she would say, what she would do. For once, the thought of tomorrow didn't feel heavy. It felt like a door opening. When morning came, she arrived early, just as the sun rose. The clinic was quiet, the air smelling faintly of disinfectant and fresh flowers. The nurse from the day before smiled when she saw her. "Good morning, Maria. Welcome." Dr. Lawson introduced her to the small team, a nurse named Lena, a receptionist named Joel, and 2 part-time helpers. They greeted her warmly. For the first time, she felt like she belonged somewhere. Her first tasks were simple: organizing patient files, cleaning the waiting area, helping older visitors fill out forms. She took her time, careful not to make mistakes. Whenever she was unsure, she asked for help. No one mocked her for it. They were patient, kind, and encouraging. By the end of the first week, Maria was exhausted but happy. Every night she went home smiling. She began to see how much small acts mattered: offering a glass of water to a nervous patient, helping a mother calm her child, holding someone's hand when they were scared. Dr. Lawson noticed her efforts. One afternoon, after the last patient had left, he said, "You have a gift, Maria. People feel safe around you. That's something you can't teach." She looked down, embarrassed but grateful. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly. He smiled. "Call me Henry," he said. She hesitated for a moment, then smiled too. "All right, Henry." Days turned into weeks. The clinic felt like a second home to her. She began to understand how everything worked: scheduling, preparing rooms, assisting during small treatments. She was learning more than she ever imagined she could. But the best part was Leo. The little boy visited often, bringing drawings and hugs. He had fully recovered, his laughter filling the clinic whenever he came. One afternoon, he handed Maria a small paper flower. "For saving me," he said shyly. Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Leo," she whispered. That small gesture meant more to her than anything money could buy. Word about Maria spread through town. People who once looked down on her began to speak differently. They no longer called her slow or useless. Some even came to her for help at the clinic. It felt strange at first, but she didn't hold grudges. She treated everyone with the same kindness she always had. One day, as she was cleaning the reception desk, Mrs. Clara, the elderly woman who used to visit her at the grocery stores, walked in. "So this is where you work now," she said with a smile. Maria nodded proudly. "Yes, it's been good to me. I knew you'd find your place someday." "Mrs. Clara said, patting her hand. "You just needed the right chance." Those words stayed with her long after the old woman left. As months passed, Maria's confidence grew. She learned how to check patients in, manage appointments, and even assist during minor medical procedures. Dr. Lawson often said she had the calm hands of a nurse. Hearing that made her heart swell. One evening, after closing the clinic, Dr. Lawson called her into his office. "Maria," he began, "have you ever thought about studying nursing?" She looked at him, surprised. "Me? I don't think I could do that." "Why not?" he asked. "You already have the heart for it. The rest is just training." She hesitated. "I don't have much money." He smiled. "We'll find a way. There are scholarships, part-time classes. I'll help you." Maria's throat tightened. "You'd do that for me?" "Of course," he said simply. "You helped my family when we needed it most. You deserve a chance to grow." Tears filled her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. That night as she walked home, the stars above seemed brighter than usual. She thought about how far she had come. Just months ago, she was the girl people called useless. Now, she had a job she loved, people who respected her, and a dream that finally felt possible. At home, she opened her notebook again and wrote, "I want to help people. I want to keep learning. I want to make a difference." She closed the notebook, smiling. For once, her words didn't feel like wishes. They felt like promises. Life wasn't perfect. Her apartment was still small, her days were long, and she still worried about the future. But deep down, she knew something had changed forever. She had saved a life, and in doing so, she had saved her own. And as she fell asleep that night, she realized something beautiful. She no longer needed anyone's approval to feel worthy. She had found her purpose in the simplest of things: kindness, compassion, and the courage to care. The world had called her useless, but she had proved that being gentle was never weakness. It was strength in its purest form. And her story was only just beginning. Maria's days at the clinic slowly turned into months, and life began to feel steady, even peaceful. The quiet rhythm of the work suited her, the sound of patients' voices, the soft hum of conversation, the smell of disinfectant mixed with the faint scent of flowers that Dr. Lawson's wife brought every Monday. Every morning she arrived early to open the clinic. She'd sweep the front steps, wipe the waiting chairs, and make tea for the staff. It wasn't part of her job, but she liked doing it. It made the place feel warm, welcoming. Patients had started to recognize her. Some even asked for her when they came in. "Where's Maria?" an old man would ask. "She's the only one who listens properly." That simple sentence meant the world to her. She never rushed people, and maybe that's what they liked. When someone was scared or confused, she sat with them and listened. She didn't have medical knowledge like the doctors, but sometimes all people needed was a kind word or a calm voice. One afternoon, a woman came in with her young daughter, who was crying from a scraped knee. Maria knelt down and gently cleaned the wound. "It's okay," she said softly. "It will feel better soon." The little girl sniffled, but stopped crying. Her mother smiled in relief. "You're wonderful with children," she said. "You should be a nurse." Maria smiled shyly. "Maybe one day," she said. But inside she was already dreaming about it. True to his word, Dr. Lawson helped her apply for a part-time nursing program. He even wrote her a letter of recommendation, explaining how compassionate and hard-working she was. When Maria was accepted, she could hardly believe it. She cried that night, tears of disbelief and joy. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving, she was building a future. The classes weren't easy. She spent her mornings at the clinic, and her evenings in a small classroom with other students, most younger than her. At first, she felt out of place. She didn't understand some of the lessons right away, and she was embarrassed to ask questions. But she reminded herself that she had faced harder things in life. She had been called useless and still kept going. So she studied late into the night, often with a cup of tea by her side and her notebook open. The same notebook where she had once written her small dreams was now filled with medical notes, diagrams, and reminders to never give up. Whenever she felt tired, she thought of Leo, the little boy whose life she had saved. His laughter and trust reminded her why she was doing this. Dr. Lawson often checked on her progress. "How's the studying going?" he'd ask when she came in. "It's hard," she'd admit with a small laugh. "But I'm learning." He'd smile. "That's all that matters. His faith in her kept her going. One evening, as she was closing up the clinic, a familiar voice called her name. She turned to see her mother standing by the door. It had been months since they'd spoken. Maria's heart skipped a beat. "Ma," she said softly, surprised. "What are you doing here?" Her mother looked around, taking in the clinic's clean walls and bright lights. "I wanted to see this place," she said. "Everyone's talking about it. About you." Maria wiped her hands nervously. "Oh, I didn't know." Her mother hesitated for a moment before saying, "I saw you on the local paper, the article about how you saved that doctor's son. I didn't realize what you'd done." Maria smiled faintly. "It wasn't much, I just helped him." Her mother shook her head. "No, it was more than that. You helped save a life, and now you're studying to be a nurse." Her voice softened. "I'm proud of you, Maria." Maria's eyes filled with tears. For years she had longed to hear those words. She couldn't speak at first, her throat felt tight. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you, Ma." Her mother reached out and took her hand. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "For the things I said before, I was wrong. You've always been stronger than I thought." Maria smiled through her tears. "It's okay," she said. "I understand." When her mother left, Maria stood by the window for a long time, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of gold and pink, and for the first time she felt truly at peace. As weeks turned into months, she finished her first term in the nursing program with good grades. Her teachers often praised her patience and compassion. "You have the heart of a real nurse," one of them said. At the clinic, she became more confident. Dr. Lawson started trusting her with more responsibilities, organizing small community health camps, helping older patients manage their medicines, and even learning how to take blood pressure. People in town began to see her differently. The same neighbors who once whispered behind her back now greeted her with respect. "We're proud of you, Maria," they'd say. "You've come so far." But despite the praise, Maria stayed humble. She never forgot how it felt to be invisible, to be looked down upon. That memory kept her grounded. One afternoon, while she was at the clinic, a young man came rushing in, panicked. "Please help," he shouted. "There's been an accident near the old bridge." Dr. Lawson immediately grabbed his medical kit. "Maria, come with me," he said. Without hesitation, she followed him. When they reached the bridge, they saw an older man lying by the side of the road, bleeding from a cut on his head. Maria's hands trembled at first, but then she remembered her training. "Sir, can you hear me?" she said firmly, kneeling beside him. The man groaned weakly. Maria quickly tore a piece of clean cloth from her bag and pressed it to the wound to stop the bleeding. Dr. Lawson checked his pulse. "He's stable," he said. "We need to get him to the clinic." They helped lift the man into the car and drove back as quickly as possible. Maria stayed calm the whole time, talking to the injured man, keeping him awake. At the clinic, she helped clean his wound, handed instruments to Dr. Lawson, and followed every instruction carefully. When the man finally opened his eyes and thanked her, Maria felt something powerful, the same feeling she had the night she saved Leo, that deep sense of purpose, that quiet, steady light inside her that said, "This is what I was meant to do." After everything was done, Dr. Lawson looked at her proudly. "You handled that perfectly," he said. "You stayed calm and focused." Maria smiled, tired but happy. "I just did what you taught me," she said. He shook his head. "No, that was all you." That night when she returned home, she sat on her bed and thought about how far she had come. She had gone from being the girl no one believed in to someone people trusted in moments of crisis. She had found strength she never knew she had. The next morning, Leo and his mother visited the clinic. Leo ran straight to her and hugged her tightly. "Daddy says you're studying to be a nurse," he said excitedly. Maria laughed. "That's right. I'm learning." "You're already the best nurse," he said with a grin. His mother smiled warmly. "We'll never forget what you did for us," she said. "You didn't just save our son. You reminded us how powerful kindness can be." Maria didn't know what to say. She just smiled, her heart full. That evening, after closing the clinic, she and Dr. Lawson stood outside watching the sky turn dark. "You know," he said, "I think helping others saved you as much as it saved them." Maria nodded slowly. "Yes," she said, Before that night, I didn't think I mattered. But now I know we all have something to give. Dr. Lawson smiled. Exactly. And you've given this town more than you realize. As she walked home under the streetlights, she passed the same corner where people used to whisper about her. Now they smiled and waved. The same town that once called her useless now called her brave. She didn't walk faster or stand taller to prove anything. She didn't need to. She had learned that real worth doesn't come from what others think, but from what's inside you when no one's watching. That night, she opened her notebook again and wrote, "I've found where I belong. I'm not the same person anymore. I want to spend my life helping others." She looked out her window, the moonlight spilling across her small desk. Her plants were blooming again, little green leaves reaching toward the light, and as she watched them sway gently in the breeze, she realized something simple but beautiful. She had been growing too, quietly, patiently, all along. A full year had passed since that stormy night when Maria found the lost boy on the roadside. Yet sometimes, when she thought about it, it still felt like yesterday. That night had changed everything. It had changed how people saw her, yes, but more importantly, it had changed how she saw herself. She was no longer the girl who felt invisible in her own home, no longer the one everyone whispered about. She was now a student nurse at the community college, a trusted assistant at Dr. Lawson's clinic, and someone who had learned to walk with quiet confidence. Life still wasn't perfect, it never was. But she had found a purpose that made even the hardest days feel meaningful. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise. She'd make a cup of tea, pack her small bag with her notebook and pen, and walk to the bus stop. The streets were quiet at that hour, and she loved that peaceful time when the world seemed to still be asleep. She used those moments to think about how far she had come, and how grateful she was just to be living a life she once thought was impossible. At the clinic, her days were busy but fulfilling. She helped patients, learned from the doctors, and practiced everything she studied at night. She'd often find herself staying late, organizing files or cleaning up after a long day, but she didn't mind. The work gave her joy, the kind that didn't fade even after the day ended. One day, while she was organizing the medicine cabinet, Dr. Lawson walked in with a smile. "Maria," he said, "I have some news for you." She turned, a little nervous. "What is it?" He held out a letter. "You've been chosen for a special scholarship for nursing students who've shown exceptional dedication. It covers your full tuition for the next 2 years." Maria's eyes widened. "Me?" He nodded. "You've earned it. I sent in a recommendation last month. They were impressed with your story and your work here." For a moment, Maria couldn't speak. Her hands trembled as she held the letter. It felt unreal. Someone like her, who had once been called useless, was now being recognized for her hard work. "Thank you, doctor," she finally said, her voice soft. "I don't know what to say." "Just keep doing what you're doing," he said kindly. "You've already proven that when you care enough, good things happen." She smiled, blinking away tears. That night, when she told her mother, there was silence on the other end of the call for a moment. Then her mother said, "I always believed you had something special. Maria, I'm proud of you." Those words made Maria cry quietly after hanging up. It wasn't because she needed her mother's approval anymore, but because she knew how far both of them had come, from misunderstanding to respect, from distance to warmth. A few weeks later, Maria joined Dr. Lawson and a few other volunteers in setting up a free medical camp in a nearby village. Many families there couldn't afford regular health care, and she was eager to help. The day was long and hot, but Maria didn't tire easily. She helped children with checkups, handed out medicine, and comforted elderly patients waiting in line. She even taught a few mothers how to clean small wounds and prevent infections. Late in the afternoon, as the crowd thinned, she sat on a bench drinking water when she noticed a young girl standing nearby, clutching a small notebook. The girl looked nervous. Maria smiled. "Hi there. Are you waiting for someone?" The girl shook her head shyly. "No, I wanted to ask something." "Of course," Maria said kindly. "What is it?" The girl took a deep breath. "I heard you work with the doctor. I want to be like you when I grow up. But people tell me I'm not smart enough." Maria looked at her for a long moment, recognizing the pain in her voice. It was the same kind of hurt she had once carried. She smiled gently. "You know, people said the same thing about me," she said softly. "But they were wrong. You don't have to be perfect or rich or popular to make a difference. You just have to care and never give up. The girl's eyes brightened. Really? Really, Maria said. Promise me you won't listen when people try to tell you what you can't do. The girl nodded quickly, smiling now. She thanked Maria and ran off to show her mother the notebook. Maria sat there for a moment, feeling something deep inside her chest. A quiet pride mixed with peace. She realized that maybe her story could inspire others the same way kindness had once saved her. After the medical camp, Maria began volunteering at a local children's center every weekend. She helped teach basic hygiene, comforted sick children, and read stories to them. Her calm voice and gentle presence made the children love her instantly. Sometimes Leo, the boy whose life she had saved, would come with her. He was taller now, his smile still bright. "Can I help too?" he'd ask eagerly. "Of course," she'd say, handing him small tasks like giving out snacks or drawing with the children. Dr. Lawson often visited too, proud to see how much Maria had grown. "You've turned this into something beautiful," he told her one day. "You've built a life full of meaning." Maria looked around at the laughing children and nodded. "I just wanted to give back what I once received, and kindness." As the year went by, her confidence grew even stronger. She passed her exams with top marks and was offered a chance to train as a full-time nurse at the hospital in town. When she received the offer letter, she stood by her window, holding it in her hands, watching the rain fall outside, just like that night when everything began. She couldn't help but smile at the memory. That rain had once felt cold and lonely. Now it felt like a friend, a reminder that even the darkest nights can lead to something beautiful if you keep walking through them. On her last day at the clinic, the staff threw her a small farewell party. They brought cake, flowers, and balloons. Dr. Lawson gave a short speech, his voice full of pride. "Maria came to us quiet and unsure," he said. "But she showed us that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it's gentle and patient, and that's what makes it powerful." Everyone clapped, and Maria tried not to cry. She thanked each of them for believing in her, then hugged Dr. Lawson. "You changed my life," she said. He smiled warmly. "No, Maria, you changed your own life. I just gave you a chance." When the evening ended, Maria walked home slowly under the streetlights. The air smelled of rain again, and the streets glistened like glass. She thought about all the moments that had led her here, the years of doubt, the night she found Leo, the day she entered the clinic, and the first time someone called her brave. She realized she didn't need anyone's approval anymore. She had found her worth long ago, in that moment when she chose to help someone without expecting anything in return. That choice had shaped everything that followed. The next morning, as she packed her bag for her first day at the hospital, she saw her old notebook on the table. She opened it and smiled at her handwriting from years ago. Shaky letters, small dreams. She picked up a pen and wrote one last line at the bottom of the page. "I was called useless once. Now I save lives, and every life I touch saves me a little too." She closed the notebook, slipped it into her bag, and stepped outside. The sky was just beginning to lighten, and the first rays of dawn touched the rooftops. Birds were singing softly in the distance. Maria took a deep breath of the cool morning air. She felt calm, grateful, and ready for whatever came next. As she walked down the road toward her new life, she noticed an old woman struggling with her grocery bags. Without hesitation, Maria hurried over to help. The woman smiled, surprised. "You're very kind, dear," she said. Maria smiled back. "Kindness changed my life," she replied simply, and with that, she continued walking, her steps steady, her heart full, her past finally at peace. For the rest of her life, people would tell her story, not because it was dramatic or grand, but because it reminded them that one person's compassion can light up even the darkest places. And those who once called her useless would never forget how wrong they had been. Because in saving one life, Maria had discovered her own. When she received the offer letter, she stood by her window, holding it in her hands, watching the rain fall outside, just like that night when everything began. She couldn't help but smile at the memory. That rain had once felt cold and lonely. Now it felt like a friend, a reminder that even the darkest nights can lead to something beautiful if you keep walking through them. On her last day at the clinic, the staff threw her a small farewell party. They brought cake, flowers, and balloons. Dr. Lawson gave a short speech, his voice full of pride. Maria came to us quiet and unsure, he said. But she showed us that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it's gentle and patient, and that's what makes it powerful. Everyone clapped, and Maria tried not to cry. She thanked each of them for believing in her, then hugged Dr. Lawson. "You changed my life," she said. He smiled warmly. "No, Maria, you changed your own life. I just gave you a chance." When the evening ended, Maria walked home slowly under the streetlights. The air smelled of rain again, and the streets glistened like glass. She thought about all the moments that had led her here, the years of doubt, the night she found Leo, the day she entered the clinic, and the first time someone called her brave. She realized she didn't need anyone's approval anymore. She had found her worth long ago, in that moment when she chose to help someone without expecting anything in return. That choice had shaped everything that followed. The next morning, as she packed her bag for her first day at the hospital, she saw her old notebook on the table. She opened it and smiled at her handwriting from years ago. Shaky letters, small dreams. She picked up a pen and wrote one last line at the bottom of the page. "I was called useless once. Now I save lives, and every life I touch saves me a little too." She closed the notebook, slipped it into her bag, and stepped outside. The sky was just beginning to lighten, and the first rays of dawn touched the rooftops. Birds were singing softly in the distance. Maria took a deep breath of the cool morning air. She felt calm, grateful, and ready for whatever came next. As she walked down the road toward her new life, she noticed an old woman struggling with her grocery bags. Without hesitation, Maria hurried over to help. The woman smiled, surprised. "You're very kind, dear," she said. Maria smiled back. "Kindness changed my life," she replied simply, and with that, she continued walking, her steps steady, her heart full, her past finally at peace. For the rest of her life, people would tell her story, not because it was dramatic or grand, but because it reminded them that one person's compassion can light up even the darkest places. And those who once called her useless would never forget how wrong they had been. Because in saving one life, Maria had discovered her own. 10 years had passed since that stormy night that changed Maria's life forever. The small-town girl who once walked home alone in the rain was now a skilled nurse with years of experience in a city hospital. She had seen life in all its forms: birth, pain, recovery, and hope. Each patient, each story, had shaped her into the woman she had become. But even as she walked through the bright hospital corridors and heard her, colleagues call her Nurse Maria, a part of her heart still belonged to her hometown, the place where her story began, the place that had once called her useless. One evening, after a long shift, she sat in the hospital garden watching the sun set behind the buildings. The air smelled faintly of rain, and for a moment, she was taken back to that old road where she'd found the lost boy. That memory always reminded her how one act of kindness had started everything. She had grown in every way, but deep inside, she still wanted to give back to the people who needed care the most, those who couldn't travel far or afford expensive hospitals. She had often dreamed of returning home, not to prove anything, but to serve. A few months later, when the hospital where she worked offered an early retirement program with a small grant for community work, Maria didn't hesitate. She took the chance. She packed her belongings, said goodbye to her coworkers, and boarded a bus headed toward her hometown, the same bus route she had once taken to school many years ago. As the landscape changed from tall buildings to wide fields, her heart felt lighter. When she finally arrived, the town looked familiar yet different. New shops, fresh paint on old walls, children playing on streets that once echoed with her own footsteps. Her mother was waiting for her outside the small family home. Time had softened her face, but her smile was still warm. "You're really home," she said, hugging her tightly. Maria smiled. "Yes, Ma, for good this time." They spent that evening talking about everything: the city, the hospital, the people Maria had met. Her mother listened proudly, occasionally wiping her eyes. "I always knew you'd make something beautiful out of your life," she said softly. The next morning, Maria walked through the town square, taking in the familiar sounds and faces. Some people recognized her immediately. "Isn't that Maria? The nurse from the city?" someone whispered. Others came up to greet her. "We heard you saved so many lives there," an old neighbor said. "It's good to have you back." Maria smiled politely, but she wasn't here for recognition. She had something bigger in mind. A few weeks later, she began looking for a small place to rent. At the edge of town stood an old, unused building that once served as a storage hall. The roof needed fixing and the walls were faded, but Maria saw potential. She walked through the empty space and imagined what it could be. Clean beds, shelves of medicine, a waiting area with sunlight coming in. It could be a clinic. She spoke to the town council about her plan. They were hesitant at first. Funding was always a problem. But when they learned about her nursing background and her experience, they agreed to help however they could. Some donated supplies, others volunteered to clean and paint. Dr. Lawson, who still ran his clinic in the city, sent her boxes of basic medicine and old equipment. Slowly, the dusty hall transformed into a bright, welcoming space. Maria named it Hope Care Center. On the opening day, the entire community gathered outside. Children ran around with balloons and an old priest blessed the building. Maria stood at the doorway, her heart full, hardly believing what she had achieved. When she opened the doors, people streamed in, elderly men with walking sticks, mothers carrying babies, children with small cuts and coughs. Maria greeted each one with patience and kindness. It felt like a dream, the kind of dream she once thought was impossible.